He opened the door. The cowboy was stunned. A beautiful young Apache woman knocked. The sun was just beginning to sink below the horizon, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and pink. Silver Creek, a small town on the edge of the Arizona desert, was quiet at this hour. Dust swirled along the empty streets, and the faint sound of cattle lowing echoed from the surrounding ranches. It was a peaceful town where everyone knew each other and life moved at a slow, steady pace. But for Jack, the cowboy, today felt different. Jack was a tall, strong man, with sun-weathered skin and hands calloused from years of working the land. He had lived on the outskirts of Silver Creek for as long as he could remember, taking care of his small ranch and keeping to himself. Most of the townspeople liked him because he was fair, dependable, and never caused trouble. He liked his life too, quiet, simple, and predictable. Every morning he would feed the horses, check on the cattle, and make sure the fences held against the harsh desert winds. Evenings were for relaxing by the fire, reading old letters or staring at the stars, thinking about nothing at all. On this particular day, Jack had been finishing his chores when he heard an unexpected sound, a knock at the front door. At first, he thought it might be one of the neighbors, maybe someone delivering supplies or asking for help with a stray cow. But when he walked toward the door and opened it, he stopped in his tracks. Standing there was a young woman he had never seen before. She looked fragile yet strong, with dark, shining eyes that seemed to hold both fear and determination. Her long, black hair fell in gentle waves over her shoulders, and she wore simple clothing that had been dusted by the desert wind. Jack felt a strange mix of curiosity and caution. The town had seen visitors from the nearby Apache reservation before, but it was rare, and usually under more official circumstances. This woman, however, seemed different. She wasn't here for business or for any official reason. There was a sense of urgency in her posture, in the way she glanced around before speaking. "Please," she said softly, her voice calm but urgent, "I need help." Jack blinked, unsure of how to respond. He could see the worry in her eyes, the silent plea that asked him to trust her. Despite his years of experience with strangers, he felt a flicker of compassion that he could not ignore. After a moment of hesitation, he stepped aside and motioned for her to come in. Inside his small wooden house, the air was cool and smelled faintly of leather, wood, and hay. Jack motioned for her to sit on a chair near the fireplace. She seemed hesitant at first, but exhaustion showed in her movements, and she finally lowered herself onto the seat. Jack handed her a glass of water, watching carefully as she took it. "My name is Yana," she said quietly. I had no place else to go." Jack nodded slowly. He didn't interrupt, allowing her to speak in her own time. Yana's voice trembled slightly as she told him a story of struggle and danger, of leaving her village because of threats she could no longer ignore. Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of someone who had seen hardship at a young age. Jack listened intently, feeling a mix of concern and responsibility. As she spoke, he noticed the subtle details that made her story more real. Her hands were scratched and dusty from traveling through the desert. Her clothes were worn from long journeys, and her eyes, though strong, reflected nights of fear and uncertainty. It became clear to Jack that she had traveled a long distance on her own, braving the harsh desert environment, and now she had ended up on his doorstep. For a moment, there was silence. Jack thought about the small risks of helping a stranger, about the whispers and questions he might face from the townspeople. But none of that mattered now. Right in front of him was a young woman who needed help, and his instincts told him to trust her. "Stay here," he said finally. "You'll be safe inside, I'll make sure of it." Yana gave a faint, relieved smile, and for a brief moment the tension in the room eased. Jack could feel a quiet bond forming, born not from words but from the shared understanding that sometimes people needed each other more than anything else. Over the next few hours, Jack prepared a simple meal of bread, beans, and stew. Yana accepted it graciously, eating slowly while keeping her hands folded in her lap. Jack tried to make small talk, asking about her journey and her family, but she was hesitant to reveal too much. There was a cautious wisdom in her eyes, as if she had learned long ago that not everyone could be trusted. Despite that, Jack found himself drawn to her stories, how she loved the open skies of the desert, how her people celebrated traditions with songs and dances, and how life in her village had taught her resilience and patience. Each word painted a picture of a world that Jack had never experienced, a life that was both beautiful and difficult. As the sun finally disappeared behind the mountains, the room grew dim. Jack lit the fireplace, and the flickering light reflected on Yana's face, making her look almost otherworldly. She thanked him quietly, and Jack nodded, feeling a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long while, he realized that his quiet, predictable life had just become something more, something meaningful. Outside, the wind whispered across the desert, carrying the scent of sage and dry earth. Jack knew that life was about to change, and though he didn't yet know the challenges that lay ahead, he felt ready. He had opened the door to a stranger, and in doing so, had opened the door to a story much larger than himself. A story of courage, trust, and the unexpected ways people can enter our lives. And so, as night fell over Silver Creek, the cowboy and the young Apache woman sat together in the glow of the fire, two strangers brought together by fate. Outside, the world remained quiet, but inside, a new chapter had begun, one that neither of them could have predicted, but both would remember forever. The morning sun rose slowly over Silver Creek, casting long shadows across the dusty streets and the surrounding desert. Jack was already up, tending to the horses and checking the fences that held his cattle. The quiet of the early hour was familiar to him, comforting in its predictability. But today, the calm felt different. Ever since Ayana had knocked on his door the night before, he could not stop thinking about her. Her presence in his small home had stirred feelings he could not name: concern, curiosity, and something that felt like responsibility. He finished feeding the animals and returned to his house, where the smell of coffee and warm bread welcomed him. Gianna was already awake, sitting by the window, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. She looked out at the desert, her eyes focused yet distant, as if she were listening to something only she could hear. Jack noticed how quiet she was this morning, the way she seemed to carry the weight of yesterday's journey in her posture. "Good morning," he said gently, not wanting to startle her. Gianna turned toward him and gave a small smile. "Good morning," she replied. Her voice was calm, but there was a hint of worry underneath. Jack could tell that the events that had led her here were still very present in her mind. After breakfast, Jack suggested that she rest while he went out to work. Iana shook her head. "I should help," she said. "I can do small chores if you will allow me." Jack hesitated but then nodded. He was used to working alone, but the idea of her being busy with something practical seemed safer than letting her sit idle. Together, they walked to the barn, where the smell of hay and animals filled the air. Yana moved carefully but confidently, helping him feed the horses and collect water for the cattle. Jack noticed how she paid attention to details, how her hands moved efficiently even though she was unfamiliar with ranch life. There was a natural grace to her movements, a rhythm that made the work seem easier than it was. As the morning progressed, they talked quietly. Yana shared small pieces of her past, carefully selecting what she felt safe enough to reveal. She spoke of her family and her home village, describing the traditions and festivals, the dances under the stars, and the songs that told stories of her ancestors. Jack listened intently, fascinated by the world she described, a world so different from his own, yet filled with a sense of belonging and community he had rarely experienced. Jack realized that Ayana's presence was teaching him something he hadn't expected. The quiet life he had cherished now felt smaller, limited. Her stories reminded him that the world beyond Silver Creek was vast, filled with beauty and struggle alike. He admired her courage for traveling alone across the desert, for seeking safety despite the dangers she faced. By midday, the sun was high and the heat pressed down on the land. Jack and Ayanna paused in the shade of a large mesquite tree, sipping water and resting. The conversation turned more serious as Ayanna spoke of the danger that had driven her from her village. She described disputes over land, threats from outsiders, and the fear that had pushed her to leave everything she knew behind. Her eyes, usually calm and strong, flickered with the memory of those frightening days. Jack felt a tightness in his chest. He had grown up hearing stories of conflict between settlers and native communities, but hearing it firsthand from someone who had lived it was different. It was real. The danger was real. And now he felt a protective instinct he could not ignore. "You don't have to stay silent," Jack said softly. "You can tell me as much as you're willing to. I'll listen." Ayanna nodded, appreciating the offer but careful not to overshare. She spoke enough to make him understand that her journey had been long and lonely, that the desert had been both a friend and an enemy, and that she had relied on her own wits and strength to survive. Jack could see the determination in her eyes, the quiet bravery that allowed her to face the unknown without collapsing in fear. As the day wore on, Jack began to consider the practical matters. Silver Creek was small, and news traveled fast. If anyone came looking for Ayanna, the town would notice. He would have to be careful. He made plans to keep her safe, thinking of ways to protect her without drawing attention. It was not a life he had ever imagined, looking after someone so directly, but he knew it was the right thing to do. That evening, as the sky darkened with the approach of night, a soft wind blew across the desert, rustling the leaves of the mesquite trees and carrying the faint scent of sage. Jack and Ayanna sat outside his home, watching the horizon turn from orange to deep purple. For the first time, they spoke about smaller, lighter things, dreams, favorite places, and small joys. Ayanna spoke of the river near her village, where she would spend hours watching the water flow, listening to the songs of birds, and feeling a freedom that seemed unattainable in her daily life. Jack told her about the wide desert nights he loved, the endless stars that made him feel part of something larger. There was a quiet understanding between them, a bridge being built from shared stories and simple acts of kindness. Jack felt the connection growing stronger, not just out of concern for her safety, but because of the person she was, resilient, thoughtful, and full of life even after facing hardship. As night fell fully, Jack noticed the first stars appear, shimmering in the vast sky above Silver Creek. He realized how lonely he had been in his routine, how much he had taken the simple beauty of life for granted. Ayanna's presence reminded him that life was not only about survival or routine, it was about connection, trust, and the courage to face the unknown together. Suddenly, a noise broke the quiet. It was faint, almost like a whisper carried by the wind, but it made both of them tense. Jack stood, scanning the darkness beyond the porch. Ayanna instinctively moved closer to him, her hand brushing against his arm for balance. Though she did not speak, her eyes reflected the same caution and fear that he felt. The desert was unpredictable, and while today had been calm, danger could appear without warning. Jack reassured her quietly, "It's probably nothing, just the wind or an animal. You're safe here." Ayanna nodded, trusting him, but the small moment reminded both of them that the world outside was not always kind. Their safety was temporary, fragile, and dependent on their vigilance. Over the next few days, they settled into a rhythm. Jack went about his ranch duties while Ayanna helped with chores and learned the ways of the land. They shared meals, talked, and sometimes just sat in silence, watching the desert move and change with the sun. Jack began to feel a deep respect for Ayanna, not only for her strength and bravery, but for her wisdom, her ability to remain calm under pressure, and her perspective on life, which was both grounded and hopeful. Ayanna, in turn, began to trust Jack more with each passing day. She realized that he was not only a protector but also a friend, someone who listened without judgment and offered help without expecting anything in return. In a world that had forced her to be cautious and guarded, this trust was rare and precious. Yet both of them knew that the calm could not last forever. The desert held dangers, people who might be looking for Ayanna, unexpected storms, or other unforeseen events that could disrupt their peace. But for now, they had found a fragile sanctuary in each other's presence, a place where stories could be shared, lessons learned, and trust built slowly over time. By the end of part 2, Jack understood that helping Ayanna was more than just a momentary act of kindness. It was the beginning of something much larger. Their lives were intertwined now, and every decision he made would impact both of them. The story that had begun with a simple knock at the door was now unfolding into a journey of courage, empathy, and connection, stretching beyond the small town of Silver Creek and into the unknown future that awaited them both. Days passed in Silver Creek, and life on Jack's ranch began to feel both familiar and new. The sun rose and set in its usual rhythm, painting the desert with the same warm hues, but there was a subtle change in the air. Jack noticed it in the way Ayanna moved with a quiet confidence around the ranch, in the way she asked questions and learned quickly, and in the way their conversations had deepened beyond simple stories of their pasts. There was a sense of understanding growing between them, as if the trust they had built was becoming unshakable. One morning, Jack awoke to find Ayanna already awake, standing outside by the fence line, her eyes scanning the distant horizon. She had been walking along the edge of the property, observing the land, and Jack felt a mixture of admiration and curiosity. She had adapted quickly to the harsh desert environment, learning the signs of weather, noticing tracks of animals, and understanding the rhythm of the ranch life. "Good morning," Jack called softly, not wanting to startle her. Ayanna turned and smiled faintly. "Good morning," she replied. Her voice was calm, but Jack could see that her eyes held a quiet alertness. Something was troubling her, though she had not yet said what it was. Over breakfast, she finally spoke. "I worry that they might come looking for me," she said, her voice steady but with an edge of concern. Jack nodded silently. He had been thinking the same thing. The desert could be lonely, but it was not entirely safe. There were people who might be searching for her, and Jack knew he had to prepare for whatever might come. "We'll stay careful," he assured her. "No one will know you're here unless we want them to. I'll make sure of it." Her eyes softened slightly at his words, but the tension remained. Jack understood that trust was not just about words, it was about actions, and he would have to act decisively if danger approached. As the day went on, the heat of the desert intensified. Jack worked with Ayanna, fixing fences and checking the water supply for the cattle. Their conversation was lighter now, more natural, filled with observations about the desert and the small joys of the land. But even in moments of calm, both of them remained alert. Jack noticed how she scanned the distance constantly, as if expecting something to appear from the endless stretches of sand and rock. Late in the afternoon, a distant figure appeared on the horizon. At first, it was hard to tell who it was, just a small dark shape moving against the bright desert sun. Jack's heart skipped a beat. He quickly moved to the porch, his eyes narrowing as he tried to make out the figure. Ayanna noticed him tense, and she moved closer, instinctively trusting his judgment. "It's probably just someone passing through," Jack said cautiously, though he wasn't entirely convinced. He could feel the tension in the air, the quiet warning that danger might be near. As the figure approached, it became clearer, a group of men riding horses, moving steadily toward the ranch. Jack's stomach tightened. He recognized the seriousness in their movements. They were not casual travelers, they were looking for something or someone. His mind raced, thinking of how to protect Ayanna without putting himself in unnecessary danger. Ayanna stepped closer to him, her hand brushing lightly against his arm. "What will we do?" she asked quietly. Jack took a deep breath. "We stay calm. We wait and watch. Don't show fear, and be ready to move if we need to." The men arrived at the edge of the property, halting their horses and scanning the ranch carefully. Jack stepped forward, raising his hand in a calm but firm gesture. "Can I help you?" he called out, his voice steady. One of the men dismounted and approached. His expression was cautious, but there was a curiosity in his eyes. "We heard a young woman might be around here," he said slowly. "Do you know anything about that?" Jack's mind raced. He knew he had to act quickly but carefully. "I haven't seen anyone like that," he replied, keeping his tone neutral. "You might be mistaken. This is private property." The man studied him for a moment, his eyes narrowing. "We'll be checking anyway," he said, but there was no immediate threat in his voice. Jack watched them carefully as they moved along the edge of the property, their horses kicking up dust, their movements deliberate and careful. Once they moved out of sight, Jack exhaled deeply. He could feel Ayanna's eyes on him, filled with a mixture of fear and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "I was afraid they would find me." Jack nodded, understanding her fear. He realized that their peaceful days had been fragile all along, and now they had been reminded of the real dangers that existed beyond the safety of his ranch. He also recognized that Ayanna had to remain cautious, but he would do everything in his power to ensure her safety. Over the next few days, Jack implemented measures to protect both of them. He reinforced the fences, made sure the horses were secure, and even dug small hidden paths that could serve as escape routes if needed. Ayanna helped with the preparations, learning quickly and demonstrating an impressive level of calm and resourcefulness. Together, they created a safe environment, but the tension of possible danger always lingered in the back of their minds. Even amidst the preparation and caution, their bond continued to grow. They spent quiet evenings talking by the fire, sharing dreams and stories, and learning more about each other. Ayanna spoke of her childhood, of the lessons her parents had taught her about bravery and resilience. Jack shared stories of his youth, of the hardships of ranch life, and the quiet joys he had found in the simplicity of the desert. Despite the looming threat, there were moments of laughter and lightness. Jack showed Ayanna how to ride horses properly, and she laughed when she stumbled or lost her balance. Ayanna taught Jack some songs from her people, the melodies carrying a warmth that filled the otherwise quiet nights. In those moments, the world felt safe, and they allowed themselves to forget the worries that lingered beyond the ranch. However, the reality of their situation could not be ignored for long. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jack noticed movement in the distance. Shadows shifted in the desert, and he instinctively knew that they were not alone. He quickly motioned for Ayanna to stay quiet, and together they observed the figures moving closer. This time, Jack could see clearly that it was a small group of men, more determined than before. Their expressions were serious, their movements deliberate. Jack's heart raced, but he knew he had to stay calm. He whispered to Ayanna, "We might have to leave. Stay close to me and follow my lead." Ayanna nodded, her eyes filled with trust and resolve. She had come far and faced dangers before, but now she relied on Jack not just for safety, but as a guide through a situation neither of them had anticipated. Jack quickly led her to a hidden path behind the barn, a route they had prepared for emergencies. The men on horseback were getting closer, and every second mattered. As they moved quietly through the desert brush, Jack could feel the tension building. Every sound, every shadow seemed amplified in the quiet night. Finally, they reached a small, hidden grove, a place Jack had discovered long ago, a safe haven amidst the harsh desert. They paused, catching their breath, and listened as the sounds of pursuit faded in the distance. For the first time that night, they allowed themselves a moment of relief, knowing they had avoided immediate danger. Gianna turned to Jack, her eyes reflecting both fear and gratitude. "Thank you," she said softly. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Jack shook his head. "We'll get through this together," he replied. He realized that protecting her was no longer just about keeping her safe. It was about building a partnership, a bond that would help both of them face whatever challenges lay ahead. As they settled in the grove, Jack reflected on how much his life had changed in such a short time. What had begun as a quiet routine on a remote ranch had transformed into a journey filled with courage, trust, and the unexpected connection between two people from very different worlds. The danger they faced was real, but so was the trust they had built, and Jack knew that together they could face whatever came next. Night deepened over the desert, stars twinkling like distant fires. Jack and Ayanna stayed close, sharing warmth and comfort, knowing that the world outside could be harsh, but within their small sanctuary they had each other. The story that had begun with a simple knock on a door was now unfolding into something much larger, an adventure of trust, bravery, and the quiet power of human connection. The days that followed were tense and quiet, filled with a strange mixture of routine and constant alertness. Jack and Ayanna returned to the ranch cautiously, but the memory of the men on horseback lingered in their minds. Even the familiar sounds of the desert, the lowing of cattle, the rustle of sagebrush in the wind, the distant cry of a hawk, felt sharper, more pointed. Every movement in the distance made Jack's chest tighten, and Ayanna's eyes constantly scanned the horizon for danger. They worked together to reinforce the fences, repair water troughs, and secure the barn. Gianna had become adept at ranch life, learning quickly and always attentive to the smallest details. Jack admired her ability to adapt and her calm under pressure. It reminded him that strength came in many forms, not just physical but mental, emotional, and spiritual. She had faced hardship before, and he realized that her courage was more profound than most people he had met. Yet even as they carried on with the chores, the outside world pressed on them. The men who had come searching for Ayanna were likely still looking, and Jack knew that Silver Creek was a small town where news traveled fast. Rumors could spread, and curiosity could bring strangers who might inadvertently reveal her location. Jack began to worry about the safety of both of them, understanding that vigilance was no longer optional, it was essential. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the desert and painted the sky with brilliant shades of orange and pink, Jack and Ayanna sat on the porch of the ranch house. They were sharing a quiet meal of bread, stew, and fresh water, and the heat of the day had softened to a warm, comfortable breeze. Ayanna spoke of her village, recalling the songs and dances she had loved as a child, and for a moment the tension lifted. But the tranquility was short-lived. Jack noticed movement at the edge of the property, shadows shifting in a way that didn't match the wind or the animals. He stiffened, his hand moving subtly toward the small rifle he kept nearby, just in case. Yana noticed his alertness immediately and rose quietly from her chair, standing beside him. "They're here," Jack whispered. His voice was calm, but his eyes betrayed the seriousness of the situation. Yana nodded, her own expression showing a mix of fear and determination. She had traveled alone before, but this was different. Now someone she trusted was counting on her as much as she relied on him. Together, they moved to a safer position inside the house, watching as three men emerged from the shadows, moving deliberately toward the ranch. The men dismounted and began walking along the edge of the property. Jack and Ayanna stayed hidden, observing their movements carefully. It was clear they were searching for someone, asking questions in low tones that carried across the desert. Jack's heart raced, but he forced himself to stay calm. Panic would not help them. Strategy and patience were their allies. "We need a plan," Jack whispered. "They won't leave until they know no one is here." Yana thought for a moment, then nodded. "There's the old cave near the creek," she said. It's hidden from view. We can use it as a temporary shelter if we need to move quickly." Jack's mind raced, calculating their options. The cave was a few miles away through uneven desert terrain, but it could provide the cover they needed. He nodded. "We'll wait until nightfall, then we move." The hours until nightfall were agonizing. Jack and Ayanna remained inside, moving quietly, sharing small sips of water and listening intently to the sounds outside. The men occasionally spoke, their voices low but firm, and Jack realized they were persistent. They were determined to find whoever was hiding on the ranch, and every passing minute increased the risk of discovery. When the sun finally set, the desert turned into a dark expanse, pierced only by the light of the stars and the faint glow of the moon. Jack and Ayanna prepared to leave, packing only what was necessary: water, a few supplies, and essentials for survival. They moved quietly through the house, careful not to make a sound. Their footsteps were soft against the wooden floor, and every shadow seemed magnified in the night. As they slipped into the darkness of the desert, Jack took the lead, his eyes scanning the horizon and every movement along their path. Ayanna followed closely, trusting his guidance and remaining alert to every sound and every shift in the wind. The journey to the cave was difficult, the terrain uneven and dotted with rocks and sagebrush. Every step required caution, but Jack moved with experience and precision, guiding them safely toward their temporary sanctuary. Finally, after what felt like hours but was only a short distance, they reached the cave. Hidden behind a cluster of boulders and partially covered by low-hanging branches, it was a perfect place to rest and regain their strength. Inside, the cave was cool and quiet, a stark contrast to the harsh desert outside. They lit a small lantern, careful to keep it low so as not to draw attention, and settled in for the night. Ayanna finally spoke, breaking the silence. "I never thought I'd make it this far," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "I was afraid I would be caught before I even had a chance to be safe." Jack placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You made it," he said, "and you'll stay safe. I won't let anything happen to you." The words were simple, but the weight behind them was profound. Ayanna felt a sense of comfort she had not known in weeks, perhaps months. She realized that she could trust him completely, that he was not only a protector but a friend and ally in a world that had often been unforgiving. Over the next few days in the cave, Jack and Ayanna adjusted to their temporary life. They rationed their supplies, found clean water from a nearby stream, and planned carefully for when it would be safe to return to the ranch. The isolation was difficult, but it allowed them to focus on survival, on strategy, and on understanding each other more deeply. During the quiet hours, they talked about hopes and fears, shared memories of childhood and family, and even laughed at small, light-hearted moments. Ayanna taught Jack more songs from her village, melodies that carried stories of courage, love, and resilience. Jack shared his knowledge of the desert, the ways to read the wind, and how to find hidden signs of life in a seemingly barren landscape. Together, they found comfort in their shared knowledge and in the bond that had grown stronger with each passing day. But the outside world was never far from their minds. Jack knew that the men searching for Ayanna might return, more determined than ever. He spent hours observing the area around the cave, noting every trail, every movement, and every potential threat. Ayanna helped him remain vigilant, learning quickly and offering insight from her own experiences in the desert. They were becoming a team, each relying on the other for guidance, protection, and trust. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in brilliant shades of red and gold, Jack and Ayanna sat near the entrance of the cave. They watched the desert stretch endlessly before them, a landscape both beautiful and dangerous. Ayanna turned to Jack, her expression serious but calm. "Do you think we can ever return safely?" she asked. Jack thought for a moment, then nodded slowly. "We will," he said. "It won't be easy and we'll need to be careful, but yes, We'll find a way, and until then we'll stay safe here." Yana smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and hope in her eyes. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of peace, knowing that she was not alone and that someone truly cared for her safety. Jack felt a deep sense of purpose as well, realizing that protecting her was not just about courage or strength. It was about trust, empathy, and the quiet determination to do what was right. As night fell fully over the desert, they settled in, listening to the gentle sounds of the wilderness around them. The wind whispered through the rocks, carrying the scent of sage and dry earth. For Jack and Ayana, the world beyond the cave was uncertain, full of dangers and challenges. But within this small sanctuary, they had found safety, trust, and a bond that could withstand even the harshest tests. The story that had begun with a single knock on a door had grown into a journey of courage, resilience, and unwavering trust. Jack and Ayana had faced fear, danger, and uncertainty together, and in doing so, they had discovered the strength of human connection, the kind of bond that could endure even in the most difficult of circumstances. The days slowly passed in the desert cave, and Jack and Ayana grew more accustomed to their temporary home. They had learned to live quietly, rationing supplies, collecting water from the small creek nearby, and keeping a careful watch on the horizon. The cave, though simple and rough, had become a place of safety, a sanctuary where they could plan, rest, and recover from the constant tension of being pursued. Yet, both of them knew that this could not last forever. Jack often thought about the ranch, the life he had left behind, and the inevitable moment when they would have to return. He knew that staying hidden indefinitely was impossible. The men searching for Ayana would not give up easily, and the world beyond the desert demanded attention. They would need a plan, one that allowed Ayana to remain safe while also regaining some semblance of normal life. Ayana, meanwhile, had begun to feel a quiet confidence in their situation. The fear that had accompanied her on the journey to Jack's ranch had softened, replaced by determination and trust. She had seen the careful way Jack observed their surroundings, had felt the protective steadiness of his hands guiding her through the desert, and had learned to rely on his judgment without hesitation. Yet, she also understood the importance of her own resilience. She had survived so much already, and she would not be passive in the face of danger. One morning, after a night of rest, Jack and Ayana sat near the entrance of the cave, discussing their next steps. The sun had just risen, casting a warm glow across the desert, and the world seemed quiet, almost peaceful. But they both knew that appearances could be deceiving. "We can't stay here forever," Jack said gently, looking at Ayana. "We'll need to return to the ranch soon, and from there, figure out a way to keep you safe without hiding indefinitely." Ayana nodded thoughtfully. "I understand," she replied, "but we need a plan, something that ensures we're not caught off guard." Jack smiled faintly, admiring her practical approach. "I've been thinking," he said. "If we move at night, we can return quietly to the ranch. I've reinforced the fences and created hidden paths. It won't be perfect, but it will give us an advantage." Yana's eyes sparkled with determination. "Then we do it," she said. "I'm ready." That night, as darkness blanketed the desert, they prepared to move. Jack packed the essentials: water, a few supplies, and items that could help them navigate safely. Yana helped, careful not to make a sound. Together, they moved through the desert with precision, following the hidden paths Jack had created. The moon cast a silver glow over the landscape, illuminating just enough to guide their steps without revealing their presence. As they approached the ranch, they could see the familiar outline of the house and barns, bathed in the soft glow of the moonlight. Everything looked as it had before, yet the tension in the air reminded them that things had changed forever. They moved quietly, making their way to the barn and slipping inside. The familiar smells of hay, wood, and animals welcomed them, but both of them remained alert. For the next few days, Jack and Ayanna stayed inside the ranch, carefully observing the surroundings and ensuring that no one had followed them. The men who had been searching for Ayanna had vanished, at least for now, leaving a fragile sense of relief in their wake. But both Jack and Ayanna knew that true safety would not come from hiding. It would come from facing the challenges and finding a lasting solution. During this time, they talked at length about what had brought them together. Ayanna shared more about her family, her village, and the traditions she held dear. Jack spoke of the desert, of his years on the ranch, and the quiet life he had once thought was enough. Through their conversations, they discovered a deep connection, a bond forged not only through fear and danger but through mutual respect, understanding, and shared courage. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, Jack and Ayanna heard a faint sound at the edge of the property. It was not threatening, just the soft clip-clop of hooves, but it made them pause. Jack motioned for silence, and together they moved toward the source. To their surprise, a young messenger from the town arrived, carrying news that changed everything. The town council had received reports about the men searching for Ayanna. They had tracked the situation and confirmed that she had faced danger, and now they were offering help to ensure her safety. This was the moment Jack and Ayanna had been waiting for, the opportunity to move forward without constant fear of pursuit. With the council's guidance, they devised a plan. Ayanna could safely return to her village under protection, with trusted guides ensuring her journey was secure. Jack would accompany her partway, staying close enough to guarantee her safety, but also maintaining the independence that had allowed her to survive on her own. It was a compromise that balanced caution with freedom, trust with practicality. The day of departure arrived. Jack and Ayanna prepared for the journey, packing their supplies and checking the horses. Ayanna felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She was returning to her home, to the people and the traditions she had missed, yet she was also aware of the dangers that could still arise. Jack reassured her, his calm presence grounding her as always. As they rode through the desert, the landscape stretched endlessly before them, both beautiful and unforgiving. They traveled in silence at times, letting the rhythm of the horses' hooves guide their thoughts. Other times they spoke quietly, sharing memories, hopes, and reflections on the journey that had brought them here. Every step was a reminder of the challenges they had overcome, the courage they had shown, and the bond that had grown between them. When they finally reached the outskirts of Ayanna's village, the sight of familiar homes, trees, and the small river that had been her childhood playground filled her with emotion. Tears welled in her eyes, not of fear, but of relief and joy. She had made it home safely, thanks to her own determination and Jack's unwavering support. Jack stayed by her side until trusted guides from the village arrived to accompany her. He knew that his role as protector was ending, but the bond they had formed would last forever. Ayanna turned to him, her eyes shining with gratitude and affection. "Thank you," she whispered. "I would not have made it without you." Jack smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. "You are stronger than you know," he said. "I only helped you see it through the journey." As the village guides led Ayanna away, Jack watched her disappear into the familiar paths of her home. The desert around him seemed quieter now, as if holding its breath in acknowledgement of what had transpired. He felt a mixture of sadness and joy, sadness that their time together in the face of danger had ended, but joy that she was safe and that their journey had succeeded. Over the following weeks, Jack returned to his ranch, resuming his life but carrying with him the lessons he had learned. Life on the ranch seemed both familiar and transformed. The desert was the same, the animals the same, but Jack's understanding of courage, trust, and human connection had deepened. He often thought of Ayanna, hoping she was safe, happy, and surrounded by the family and traditions she loved. Meanwhile, Ayanna settled back into her village, greeted with joy and relief by her family and friends. She shared her story carefully, recounting the courage she had shown and the support she had received from Jack. Her experience became a source of inspiration, a story of resilience, friendship, and the quiet power of trust. She had faced danger, uncertainty, and fear, yet she had emerged stronger and more confident in herself and her place in the world. Months later, Jack received a message from Ayanna, sent by a trusted messenger. It was simple but filled with warmth. A thank you for his protection, a recounting of her life returning to normal, and a hope that their paths might cross again. Jack smiled, feeling a sense of closure and fulfillment. Their journey had begun with a single knock on a door, had carried them through danger, trust, and discovery, and had now concluded with safety, understanding, and mutual respect. Looking back, Jack understood that life was unpredictable. A simple act of kindness, opening a door to a stranger, had led to a journey that challenged him, changed him, and reminded him of the profound strength of human connection. Ayanna had taught him courage, resilience, and trust, just as he had helped her navigate danger and uncertainty. Together, they had faced challenges that neither could have faced alone. The desert remained quiet, stretching endlessly under the sun and stars, a constant reminder of the world's beauty and danger. Jack returned to his routine, but now he carried with him a deeper appreciation for life, for trust, and for the unexpected ways that people can enter our lives and leave a lasting mark. Ayanna's journey had ended safely, and Jack's life had been forever enriched by the experience. And so, the story that began with a knock on the door concluded with courage, trust, and a bond that time and distance could not erase. Two lives had intersected under extraordinary circumstances, teaching both Jack and Ayanna the value of kindness, bravery, and the quiet power of human connection, a lesson that would stay with them forever.